Marcus Vance has recently claimed that I have misrepresented the data of Wushu Engineer's video regarding the power of nunchuck strikes in two hands.
Oh, cool. More nunchuck versus stick stuff. Let's see it.
I said that nunchucks get no significant additional increase in power from striking with them in two hands, according to Wushu Engineer. Two-handed strikes hit with 50% more power than one-handed strikes. That additional power did not happen with two-handed strikes on nunchucks. Marcus speculates that I might not have watched the whole video, and that nunchucks actually get a 30% increase in energy. He's being extremely dishonest here in a very manipulative way that many people will not catch. First, he conflates the terms energy and power. I was very specific in my choice of words and said power intentionally because I was quoting the Wushu Engineer himself.
The nunchaku was much less affected by transitioning from a one to a two-handed usage than the flute or stick. There was a 33% increase in impact duration and no change in apparent mass or power.
But even though I quoted the Wushu Engineer directly, Marcus claims I didn't watch the video if I missed this point that he then brings up.
I found their data and the stick did hit with 50% more energy with a two-handed strike. That's a ton. Let's see if there was no increase like he said with the nunchuck. Oh, there was a 30% increase, one to two-handed. That's a pretty significant difference from what he said. How could you miss this? Maybe he just didn't watch it.
No, I didn't miss it. I was directly quoting the video.
And no change in apparent mass or power.
Marcus might be trying to pretend that the 50% increase in power was me referring to the 54.9% increase in kinetic energy that a stick received when striking with two hands, to then try and justify his comparison to the 30% increase in kinetic energy that the nunchuck received. This is not the case at all. I was not talking about the kinetic energy. Indeed, the kinetic energy only comprises a portion of the total calculation needed to determine the total impact force. It's clear in my video that I was not saying the nunchucks received no increase in any metric when used in two hands, only that there was no significant increase in power, not kinetic energy or impact duration, but specifically power, and that the nunchucks did not receive the 50% increase in power that a stick did when used in two hands. And it also seems I understand how kinetic energy contributes to impact force more than Marcus does, because Marcus disingenuously represents kinetic energy as power. Kinetic energy can contribute to the power of an impact, but it is not a representation of overall power, which is exactly what Marcus uses this statistic as. The two-handed nunchuck strike did receive a 31% increase in kinetic energy, which refers to the speed of the striking end. But what Marcus clearly does not understand is that even if the striking end is moving faster, if there is no significant increase in apparent mass, velocity, impulse, as well as other significant factors, the overall impact force can still be negligibly affected. But he literally presents the 31% increase in kinetic energy as a 31% increase in total overall power or force of the impact, meaning he is implying that all the metrics that contribute to the total impact force were all increased when using a nunchuck with two hands to result in a 31% increase in total impact force, which it most certainly is not. What Marcus has done here is actually profoundly deceptive and misinformed, latching onto the kinetic energy increase and claiming it as an overall increase in power. Now, he did not say this directly, but remember, he twists my words where I was referring specifically to power. He is simply talking about energy, and then conflates kinetic energy as the same type of energy I was referring to, which I was not. So, Marcus, here is a lesson in physics, and unlike your example, an honest reading of Wushu Engineer's data. Calculating the total impact force on an object or surface typically involves considering several factors, far more than just kinetic energy. Things that must be considered are the mass of the object, the velocity of the object, and the kinetic energy as part of the velocity. impact angle, duration of impact, material properties, conservation of momentum, friction, elasticity, area of impact, and even external forces such as gravity. Marcus seems to naively think that a 30% increase in kinetic energy will result in a 30% increase in overall impact force. But as we can see from the data that Wushu Engineer was able to record, there were many factors that were not increased to a statistically significant degree when using nunchucks with two hands. One of the most significant was the increase in apparent mass. Using two hands on nunchucks only increased the apparent mass by 0.06%. That's basically nothing. Combined with many of the other factors that did not increase to the same percentage, as did a stick when using two hands, that 30% increase in kinetic energy does not contribute to a higher impact force to the same percent. The relationship between the kinetic energy and the total impact force is not linear. It is not a one-to-one relationship, as Marcus naively and amateurishly assume. This shows a fundamental lack of ability in reading data like this, poor research methodology, and what also looks like a type of unfortunate eagerness, a willingness to jump the gun before having double-checked his claims, and being so willing to misrepresent the data and what others have said. And, as I said in the video that Marcus was trying to debunk, nunchucks receive no significant increase when you strike with them two-handed versus one-handed. That's not to say they receive no increase, just no significant increase. And it is not a 30% increase as Marcus claims. Everything that I said is absolutely correct. Instead, Marcus seems to be trying to get some clout and attention by disingenuously misrepresenting what was said in the Wushu Engineer video and spreading categorical falsehood about my own credibility and accuracy.
How could you miss this? Maybe he just didn't watch it.
Marcus, before you attempt to correct someone, it might help if you knew what you were talking about. And here's a little bonus to show the disingenuous nature of his approach. And found there was no significant increase when you strike with a nunchuck one-handed versus striking two-handed.
Oh, we're talking about how powerful they are one versus two-handed. That's not really comparing them to each other.
I was literally comparing the difference of power between a nunchuck and a stick when you strike with them in one hand or two hands. That is directly comparing them to each other, yet Marcus disingenuously tried to twist it or represent that comparing the difference between one-handed strikes and two-handed strikes wasn't comparing the differences between a stick and nunchucks. And he literally says that's not really comparing them to each other.
Oh, we're talking about how powerful they are one versus two-handed. That's not really comparing them to each other.
This just shows that it is the type of person who's desperate to disagree to try and win points, even going so far as creating disagreement and confusion when not only was it very clear what I was saying, he understands it too. The entire video is discussing this comparison, yet here he claims it's not really comparing the two, even though he continues to comment on how I compare those two weapons. Not a good look.